Hi guys, welcome back to another episode. So in today's episode we're going to be looking at leg muscles, and then the final part of this series will look at the feet. So in terms of the legs, one of the most important things is just to get down the shapes and the landmarks. So I'm going to draw the front side of the leg as a whole view for you guys to see and label, so you can start to get an understanding of how to structure it. So essentially we're going to break it down into boxes and cylinders, and then we're going to build the muscles on top of that. So I'm just going to draw this out. And so I'm just drawing a box here to represent like the pelvis. After I've done that, start constructing cylindrical shapes. So one there, gonna have one here as well. Yeah, and we can start building off this. So the first thing we're actually gonna look at here, can look at the quadriceps. So in terms of quadriceps, I like to think of them as like a flower shape. So you'll have this area here that represents the kneecap going down into the tibia, and then off that you'll build like a flower petal. Something that's kind of like that, and then you can add contour lines to show that it's a 3D form. And this shape here represents the quadriceps, and that's just going to sit over the top of here, so I'll just draw that in. So I'll start down here where the kneecap is. And then put the kneecap in like that, and then we're going to build off that kind of thing with like a flower petal shape. So I'll curve round like that, curve around again like that. Curve around down here, curve around down there, and that makes the quadriceps, this shape here. And so I'm going to add contour lines across just to show the 3D form. So this makes the quadriceps. So the first shape that I want you to remember is this shape here, where you've got like a T or a cross, which represents the kneecap, and then imagine that you've got 3 petals, or 3 very long petals that come from that shape. Because that shape there represents the quadriceps. And on the inside, so just above the quadriceps, on the inside attaching to the pelvis, you have this triangular shape here, which represents the abductor muscles. And so the abductors you can just think of as like a triangle, and it will go on the inside. I'll draw it on the other side so it's more clear. So that's our abductors on the inside of the leg right there. And so you can think of it as like a triangle, but a bit of a curved triangle. Now, in terms of the bottom from the side view, we're not doing a full side view, but in this angle, you will see part of it. We're going to do the gluteus medius and the tensor fallata. In terms of shape, just do like a curve, a point that comes out and curves down, because essentially the big curve here is the gluteus medius, and then this shape here is the tensor fallata. And so over here I'm just going to put that in. So that's going to represent the gluteus medius right here, and then underneath I'm going to put the tensor fallata. And that's going to represent the tensor fallata. Okay, so we've done quads, we've done gluteus medius, tensor fallata. The final thing that's important in terms of the upper half of the leg from the front side is the sartorius. Now this is literally just like an S curve muscle, so honestly you can just draw like an S shape because it will always be in like an S curve. So from here, or from the top corner of the box, we're just going to do an S curve. Like that. And we just make sure that it's wide or slightly wide, and that represents the sartorius. On this side we'd come down from this corner and we just do it like that. That represents the sartorius muscle. Now, I am going to do the bottom half of the leg because we want to label this. Yeah, so I'll just draw. This is going to represent this. So the bottom half of the leg, you're going to have the kneecap, going down into the tibia. So you want to draw that T shape, or imagine like a sword in the hilt of a sword. That might be another way to visualize the bone. And then what I like to think about is curves. So from this, we're going to curve out like that, and then we're going to curve back in. And then on the outside it's going to be like a long, round S curve. Kind of like that. Okay, let's draw the muscles over the top. So the first one here, coming from the corner, is going to be the tibularis anterior. That's the tibularis anterior. Just behind this bone here, we're going to have the soleus. Yeah, so we're gonna have the tibularis anterior coming from the corner of that T or that sword shape. The soleus, which is a small muscle that's going to be here. And then from this corner, we're going to have the extensor digitorum. And honestly, you don't have to remember all these kind of shapes. This one it's more simple when you get down into breaking down the shape into one big form. And then Proneus is going to be here. And finally, you're going to have some view of the gastrocnemius. So I'll just label all this out. So this I'm just going to label as quads. In short for quadriceps. The abductor muscle, I could do 2 lines going down here. Those are the abductors, here and here. Sartorius. Here and here. Tibia. Gluteus medius. Which is this one here, and the tensor filata, which is just underneath right here. So, and then from the front side, tib here, tibialis anterior, to the side, I'm gonna have the soleus and the gastrocnemius. So this side extensor digitorum. On this side, I'm gonna have the Proneus. And gastrocnemius. So, one way I like to break down the bottom half of the leg is actually just by thinking about that tibia, or like the kneecap. Let's see, it's coming down here. And what I'll do is I will do a curve coming into the kneecap like that, and then on this side we do a shorter. A shorter curve like that. And that's how I like to group all of this together. So just to show you what I mean, this is like a good example where you have the kneecap going down into the tibia, and then you've got like a S curve, and then this one's like a smaller triangle. And that's how I like to break down the bottom half of the leg. So now that we've looked at the front, I'm gonna look at breaking down the front in simple ways or examples from the book. TB Choi has an interesting way of breaking it down, which I like. So the way TB Choi breaks it down is she'll break down sections. So the quadriceps she'll have as like a whole shape, so I'll just draw it out here. And this is just like the simplification of it. So this shape will represent the quadriceps. As she comes down, this shape is representing the kneecap. So that's the kneecap right there. And this is kind of in perspective, so my perspective drawing might not be so great. And then she comes down into the lower leg. And we're still thinking about S curves. And that little point on the inside. So the outside you can think about having a longer S curve. The inside, just think about having like a little point or a little indentation like that. And then this is gonna follow the tibia down to where the foot is. Essentially it's broken down into zones. So zone 1, which is the quads. Zone 2, I'd group these two, which is the kneecap, or the area coming down into the kneecap. And then zone 3 is that tibia area where you've got like the peroneus, the gastrocnemius, all of those muscles grouped into S curves rather than thinking about the individual muscle strands. And then I'm not going to draw out this foot in a really detailed way. But yeah, then you have the foot at the bottom. And we can shape that out. But essentially she'll break it down into sections. 1, quads, 2, kneecap, 3, tibia, with the S curve in like the point. So when it comes to the back half of the leg, I feel like it's a lot more simpler. So first of all, I'll draw up here. So think about that box shape again. And as you get better, you won't really need box shapes as much. So here, if you draw like a cross, three kind of oval like shapes, connect that up together. That's gonna make the shape of like the gluteus maximus, or the bottom. So to show you that here, it's gonna look something like that. You can do some contour lines going across the edge like that. That's gonna represent the bottom, the gluteus maximus. Gluteus medius is obviously to the side here. I'm gonna use that cylindrical shape again. I'm gonna have the hamstrings. So for hamstrings, I want you to ink out this shape here. I'm trying to think about what it looks like. You can imagine like a chicken bone. So for hamstrings here, let's put that in. That's our hamstring, or hamstrings, there. And then here on the side we have the iliotibial tract, which kind of looks like a spanner. It's like this shape here. Coming down, and then just underneath where the hamstrings are, as it comes back down, you're gonna have your gastrocnemius, and the gastrocnemius is actually very similar to this shape here. So all that's gonna happen is you're gonna make sure to curve round. Make sure to curve round, do that triangle shape, and then that just comes down to like a point like that. But that's pretty much muscles from the back. So hamstrings, which is this right here. Gastrocnemius. Both of these can just be thought as chicken legs, like that, or a chicken bone. Like that, but imagine there's a triangle. Kind of like that. And then this is more a side view, but iliotibial tract. And then obviously the gastrocnemius. And to me, those are the main muscles that you have to think about from the back. So to recap, from the front, think about the flower petal shape with the quads. You also have the abductor, which is on the inside of the leg, the inside half of the leg here and here, which normally shows up as like a triangle. The sartorius, which is like an S-curve muscle coming down from the top half of the pelvis. And then with the bottom half, rather than thinking about all the individual muscles, I would rather you thought about the outside of the leg being like that, and the inside of the leg being like that. I'd rather you thought about that kind of shape and the differences between these two shapes to draw the outside half of the leg, or the bottom half of the leg. So now we're going to get on to some examples. I'm going to start off with that like box shape, and then if you remember the gluteus maximus, think about it's more like a curved butterfly shape. So this is what I will do. I will draw this kind of thing out, and I will curve that shape like that. Kind of like, I guess, think about two curved beans, if that helps more than the butterfly. That's our gluteus maximus, or the bottom. Now as we come down, I think about curving my line. Now for the hamstrings, I'm just going to show it very simply as like a shape like that, like an N. So I'll just do that here. That represents the change in planes of the hamstrings. And then as we come down, think about like curving it. And then we can do a similar thing to this N shape here for the gastrocnemius muscle. Like that for the gastrocnemius muscle. And we just draw that. Coming down to a tip like that. And then all we need to do is emphasize that curve. So going down into that. And then remember on the inside, you can do this. That's one leg. Second leg. So another thing that I learned with legs, like if this leg is curving in like this, then the other leg should be opposed with the opposite curve, so it should curve out like that. It creates like a sense of rhythm. So because this leg is curving in, you're going to curve out with the other leg. So I'm going to curve like this with the other leg. That's gonna come into where the kneecap is. Gonna draw and a lot of it is actually about these curves. So just drew the rest, curved round, and then for here again, think about that N kind of shape. Doing an N shape here to represent the place where the hamstrings finish. And then that just comes down. And I'm just curving around like this. I'm just doing that into the gastrocnemius muscle. Same thing again. Do that kind of N or that curved C shape. You can even separate that out if you want. And that gives us our gastrocnemius. And then that just comes down into a tip. And then you just attach the feet to it. We're going to do the feet in the next video, so don't worry if we don't do it here. Yeah, and so that's the back half of the leg. Or that's how I would break down the leg in a simple way. And you can see we're not drawing all the details that we looked at here. We're just thinking about the overall shape. So here, butterfly, curved butterfly shape for the bottom. Here, we just think about curving round, but remembering that C curve or N shape for the hamstrings. And then underneath, you kind of draw like a bulbous form here, and you just make sure that you remember that triangle shape or that curved triangle shape for the gastrocnemius, because then it comes down. And you can see it really does resemble the chicken bone. So let's look at breaking down front view. So I'm just going to do it here. This is to represent kind of like the pelvis and the stomach. And then I'm just going to curve across like that. And our belly button is going to be here. So here on this side we're going to draw the gluteus medius. And just draw that curving in. And you can see I don't draw all like the distinguished features and things like this. It's just an overall shape, but making sure to add curvature. Okay, and now I'm going to group the quadriceps into one big shape that comes down into that knee. So you can see it's not 1, 2, 3, it's just grouped as one big overall shape here. And we can do a bit of a curve here to represent that kneecap. as we come down, we're gonna have, these are gonna be the hamstrings, I think, on this side. And we're gonna follow that S curve. So remember, look at the S curve. So if it's folding around like this, then we're gonna have to come back in and come back out. So come back in and then come back out. Just need to improve that. So come back in, come back out, and we're gonna come back down like that. And this here represents, this bulge here represents the gastrocnemius muscle. This one here. And then it's just gonna follow the tibia down. So you follow the tibia down like that. And then remember that point where we have on the outside, we have like a S curve. On the inside we have like a point. So on the inside here, I'm just gonna draw that point. And it doesn't always have to be that pronounced. It can be a bit curved. I'm gonna draw that point. And then that comes down into that region where the leg starts. Let's just draw. Something like that to represent the leg. And then this side, remember the leg rule? It's not something you always have to follow, but it is kind of pretty accurate, where if this leg is curving in, the other leg is going to be well, actually no, it's not like, I guess this is an example where it's not quite the same, because this leg, we can do a cylinder or like a cylindrical shape to represent the leg. This is kind of curving like this. And that's gonna, there isn't as much indication in this drawing actually from the book, but essentially it does show like a bulbous form for the quadriceps. It shows like this for the quadriceps, and it probably also makes the abductors more easy to see, because this would be the abductors here, and that just comes down into our kneecap. Like that. And then on the inside, we're just going to follow that curve around like that. So curve in, curve down, let me just follow that to a point like that, and then we're just gonna follow this leg down into where the foot is. We can pronounce this kneecap a bit like that, and then our foot, I'm just going to do something like that, but that represents of it. So that's an example of drawing from the back half and thinking about simplification as a whole, and that's also an example of drawing from the front half and thinking about simplification. So the rule when it comes to simplification is thinking about how I can take these muscle groups and break them down into a shape as a whole rather than its individual pieces. So you can see that in Michael Hampton's book he does that right here, where he groups all the quads together as like one whole shape. He does it here where he groups the quads together again as like a whole shape. And he's not going to, you don't point out every single line. You can do some things that accentuate the tibia or specific anatomy features, but you're not going to draw every line. So hopefully that helps you get started in terms of drawing legs. I know that it's not extremely comprehensive, but I don't want to make this video too complicated. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Subscribe if you want to see more videos. I got a tablet recently, so I've been doing a bit of digital art on that, which has been fun. Yeah, and let me know what you want to see, whether it's values and shading, whether it's a different kind of anatomy video breaking down something else. Next episode we'll look at legs, and then I'm not too sure what I'll create, but we'll see.